Eric Stanley. I'm the Public Participation Coordinator for the Bureau of Water in the Department of Environmental Services. We also have Mr. Henry Porter, who is representing our division, director of the agency over here as well. Christopher Whitehead, who's also one of our attorneys for our Office of General Counsel. We have John Poole, who is our Dams and Stormwater Division Director. We also will be given a presentation by John McCain, who's the Dam Section Manager for the Department of Environmental Service. We also have a couple more members of our agency as well in the corner over there, Megan and Kat. Also joining us will be Brian Motley with the Department of Transportation here in Camden. We also have Mr. Joe Haas, who's with Michael Baker, a contract with the City of Camden, and Matt DeWitt as well from the City of Camden. So we're going to kick off by, like I said, I am Derek Stanley. So we're going to start with a presentation with John McCain, and we hope that you find this meeting very informative and will help you succeed in what you're planning to do with your dam. So, John.
Thanks, Derek. Trying to figure out why my clicker is not working here to advance the slide, but I don't need it. We are going to record this meeting, just so you folks know, and it will be posted on our website. This thing's not working. Let me get this out the way. But again, yeah. So good evening, and thank you for coming, and thanks for everyone's interest in this topic. I know it's, we were here August of 2024 to talk, for the same reason, and so we're back today. We have main reason for being here is we do have new information. We do want to update everyone on what has happened since our last public meeting. We do want to hopefully find solutions tonight, and definitely let folks know, what we see as the path forward, or at least options for a path forward as we go from here. But I think, the big takeaway from tonight is the dam, the Upper Sunnyhill Dam. It can't just be left as it is. There has to be a plan and a path forward. It is deteriorating. I mean, the condition is not improving. It's deteriorating. So that's mainly why we're here tonight. So you'll hear, you've already heard from Derek kind of with the introductions of our staff from DES. I'll go ahead and we're going to introduce, we have some other folks here tonight. You're going to hear from not just me tonight. So I will we'll introduce a few other speakers. I'm going to go through the same background on the dam that I gave at the previous meeting we had. Hopefully, maybe we have people tonight who didn't attend the first meeting. So we definitely want to make sure everyone understands kind of the history and how we got to this point. We're going to hear a report on the current conditions of the dam from engineers with Michael Baker Incorporated. And Michael Baker is an international engineering firm that the city has hired to look into the condition of the dam. So they will be given their kind of report on that. And then we're going to talk about some possible solutions and take some time for question and answer. And if at the end of that, if folks in the community want to discuss amongst themselves, while everyone is here, we'll feel free to use the room, use the space at the end of the, towards the end of the meeting for any discussion you folks want to have. All right, so Derek so I will say, I'm John McCain with the Dam Safety Program at DES. We also have Matt DeWitt, who is your city manager here. On the front row here, we have Joseph Haas with Michael Baker International. You'll be hearing from him later in the presentation. And then we also have a representative from DOT, Mr. Brian Motley, who is also here tonight. So to start with some background, everyone probably is familiar with the location of the dam. It's part of the Sunnyhill community, which was developed in the late 1960s, 3 miles north of Camden. On this map, what we're showing is in light blue is what is the watershed, the area that drains to the dam. So that's the area that when it rains, the water from in that area collects and flows to the dam. And then in dark blue is essentially what is potentially at risk should the dam fail. So what is downstream of the dam, and what is downstream includes Sunnyhill Drive, which is already closed at one location. So a failure of the dam could probably result in Sunnyhill Drive being completely cut off. But also further beyond that is Knights Parkway, Knights Hill Parkway. Beyond that, here's a closer look at the watershed and where the dam is, and Sunnyhill Drive, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. So the dam, we call it Upper Sunnyhill Pond Dam. It's got had a few different names over the years. Sunnyhill number 1. There's also a Lower Sunnyhill Pond and Lower Sunnyhill Dam, and that one was referred to as dam number 2. The year the dam was constructed, about 1964. That comes from an old Army Corps of Engineers report. It did not become a regulated dam until 1979, which is when the dam safety program and the regulations were first enacted. So the dam was built before there was a dam safety program, before there were regulations or standards for how dams are supposed to be built. The Army Corps, I believe, is who says that the designer was Shetty Tedderton, who was also a land surveyor, who was also one of the developers of the Sunnyhill subdivision. It is considered a high hazard dam. Again, for the reasons I mentioned, it could impact roads. It could also impact homes that are around the lower pond. Again, the reason for this hazard classification, in the event of failure, dam would potentially inundate homes on Leonard Circle and Overtop roads, Sunnyhill Drive and Knights Hill Road. The dam height and length are here from what the Corps reported. Again, the watershed is fairly small. It's only about 0.2 square miles, 115 acres. It's impounding an unnamed tributary to the Wateree. The road on the dam is Sunnyhill Drive. It's a state secondary route. The department last did a formal inspection of this dam back in July of 24, and it was given a poor rating, and nothing has improved since then. Again, the dam was built sometime between 64 and 69, but this shows, in some aerial photography where it was not there in 64 and is there in 69. Again, the Army Corps of Engineers are who first inspected this dam back in 1979. And even then, they called it a high hazard dam. And they also mentioned the hazard potential has been defined as high because several structures that are located on waterfront lots around Sunnyhill Pond number 2, directly downstream, appear to be in areas susceptible to flooding. I think the Corps identified problems when they first inspected it that still exist, and to this day. Here's a sketch or a plan view of the dam from the Army Corps inspection, and what you can see is the dam has a spillway structure, which is here in the center, kind of circled in the magenta. I don't know what that is, but It's a drop inlet spillway. You can see it's up in the upper right. It's about 4 feet wide across the front, 2 feet deep. And then, and that's the water enters that spillway and passes through the dam, and it discharges in the lower Sunnyhill pond. The kind of the highlighted blue is what we, the department, consider to be the dam. It's more than just, it's more than just what's under the roadway. It has an upstream slope, it has a crest, and it has a downstream slope. And all of that constitute the dam. And even the spillway structure, which is out in the pond, but is still considered part of the dam. And again, showing a profile view of the dam. The drop inlet is the spillway where the water enters. It passes through a 36-inch corrugated metal pipe under the roadway, and then is outlets at the lower Sunnyhill pond. So from 1979, again, when the Army Corps of Engineers inspected the dam and found that the dam had deficiencies, a lot transpired between 1979 and 2001. A lot of this, that in this intervening period, was the department, or I guess my precursors in the dam safety program, trying to get the repairs that were needed made to the dam. And initially, the people who were said to be owners of the dam essentially not accepting that ownership, which led to legal actions. And so the history kind of between 79 and 2001 is a lot of time spent in court, spent with making an effort to have someone accept ownership of the dam and make the needed necessary repairs. It took until 2001 for there to be some kind of a solution or a resolution to this, and it resulted in a settlement agreement between the previous owners or the developers of the Sunnyhill community and what was at the time the lot owners, the property owners around the lake, and DOT, and even the South Lake folks, the homeowners association. A settlement agreement between all these parties. And again, this was reached in 2001. And the settlement agreement, in summary, it specifically named the parties that were subject to this settlement agreement, and they were the lot owners at the time. It also named the John West, Shetty Tedderton, and Alice Ford as the owners, and who were going to essentially quit claim deed their ownership to a homeowners association that was to be formed to own and take care of the dam. And then again, DOT was a party to this. DOT had the role of DOT was to remove trees within their right of way. And then the South Lake Homeowners Association was also a party to this. And their role or their part is to allow access to the downstream side of the dam to the newly formed or to be formed homeowners association. And so this is hard to read, but this is just some highlighted language from that settlement agreement, basically laying out the roles and the requirements that both the homeowners of lots on Sunnyhill Pond, what they were going to agree to, and but ultimately was a judge signed this settlement, so it was a requirement, by a court. And so, long story short, the ownership of the dam was to pass to a homeowners association that was to be formed to essentially take ownership of the dam. And so what we have, a homeowners association was formed. It was called Sunnyhill Upper Lake Incorporated. And it has, it's a corporation that was registered with the South Carolina Secretary of State's office. It was a corporation with shares. Each of the lots around the lake at the time were shareholders. Each lot, equivalent to a share in this corporation. And so this was agreed upon to be the owner of the dam at that time. And pulling this up, this is showing the departments what we have determined were the parties to that settlement, either folks whose names appear in that settlement that still live there and still own that property, or folks that have come in and purchased lots that are still subject to that agreement. So in the green, these lots would be currently owned by people whose names appear in that settlement. In blue would be folks who have come in and purchased the lots since that settlement. So their names don't appear in the settlement, but the lots were still subject to that settlement. And then the red circles, to our best determination, were not subject to that settlement. So again, as I mentioned, that settlement required Mr. Tedderton, Mr. West, and Ms. Ford to quit claim the dam, the property that the dam is on, to that homeowners association. And this is the deed, the quit claim deed that accomplished that transfer of property ownership. And so, at the time, it seemed all of the requirements of the settlement had been fulfilled at the time. The homeowners association was created. The land was quit claimed to the homeowners association. DOT removed trees. And so it seemed, at the time, that everything had been accomplished and concluded, in accordance with the settlement. But then come 2013, what happens is the Sunnyhill North Lake. Did I feel like, am I messing that up? Or am I getting Sunnyhill North Lake was dissolved by the essentially administratively dissolved by the Secretary of State's office for what we believe is just failure to file an annual report. And that is, all corporations must file an annual report to the Secretary of State. And so that we think it was something just as minor as not filing the reports that led to this dissolution of the corporation. In 2014, the department reached out to the registered agent for that corporation, asking about the fact that it was, we were essentially trying to set up an inspection at the time. But the response that we received was that the registered agent was essentially saying that each of the lot holders that surround the lake are stockholders in the corporation. And so, that is consistent with the settlement. That's consistent with the articles of incorporation. And so, I think, and that's still the position we are taking today. So now I will let Joe Haas with Michael Baker come up and if we can get a pointer that works.
I get upgraded the new software. Thanks, John.
Yep.
Let's see here. All right, so just to recap, I'm Joe Haas. I'm with Michael Baker International. How we got involved in the project, the city of Camden reached out to us and basically told us, hey, they're looking to help out the residents of the community, of the Sunnyhill community, you guys, and kind of help move this project forward or do some additional investigation, kind of see what the current condition is and kind of what those next steps might look like. I do want to highlight here real quick before I forget. It'll make sense a little bit later in the presentation. We do still have funding available with the city that they've already agreed to basically utilize some of that additional funding that we still have left over after we've performed our initial work. That can be used for the ultimate owner of the dam to continue to progress the work forward. So when I get into this, I kind of want to break the dam into kind of two different components. There's the geotech side, which is kind of the subsurface or the structural integrity of the dam. And then there's the hydrologic and hydraulic side of the dam, which deals with the water. So to start with, what we did is we engaged a subconsultant, S&ME. They specialize in the geotechnical side of dams. And what we engaged them to do after discussions with both dam safety, the city, as well as DOT, kind of coming up with a plan as to how to tackle this. How can we do some additional investigation without adversely impacting the dam? So given the question marks associated with the ownership, we wanted to make sure, as well as the condition of the dam, we wanted to make sure we weren't doing any type of invasive testing. So the additional geotechnical work that was performed was all non-invasive type of work. So we're not punching holes in the dam. We didn't do anything to compromise the integrity or the structural capacity of the dam. It was more of the kind of non-invasive type testing, which I'll get into on the next slide. What I've got summarized here is that S&ME did develop a report of their findings, which can be made available to you guys if interested. So what they kind of did to kind of high level summarize the additional investigation, what was done. All those points are kind of GPS shots. And what the geotech did is they basically took a lot of different soundings using electromagnetic readings to basically explore the subsurface beneath the dam. And what that did was trying to highlight where there may be anomalies within the dam itself. So it took it at several different depths. And what the ultimate graphic or map showed is a lot of those anomalies or hot spots generally were confined to the locations where we're currently seeing sinkholes. But there are also locations that were highlighted that were outside of areas where you're seeing actual physical signs of deterioration currently. Unfortunately, though, with the non-invasive type testing, the anomalies that showed up in that report could be from a numerous amount of different factors. It could be a change in soil material. It could be the presence of metallics or some type of pipe underneath the dam that we physically can't see. Or the biggest concern is those anomalies very well could be voids, which are compromising the integrity of the dam. So although the initial invasive or non-invasive testing did show and highlight some of those anomalies within the dam itself, we're unable to definitively conclude that those are voids at those areas without additional invasive testing, which is why we still have money left over in the contract, because we decided to, without actually having an owner currently identified to be able to give permission for us to do some invasive testing, we kind of had to pump the brakes there and stop from a further investigation. So kind of staying on the non-invasive testing, dam safety was helpful. And last week, I think you guys actually did this. They acquired some bathymetric data or survey on the dam. Bathymetric survey is just basically taking ground elevation beneath the water. So I don't know if the pointer works. Yep. So right here on the downstream side of the outlet control of the upper dam, what was identified on these next couple slides is there's some significant sediment buildup downstream. A lot of those sinkholes that we're seeing along the dam, that lost material is making its way to the downstream side. So that's what that's indicating essentially is that material is making its way through the core of the dam, or there's deteriorations in the existing pipe. Given the 60, 70 years of its life, it's probably in poor condition as well. but all that material is essentially depositing and ending up and collecting on the downstream side. So here's kind of a graphic of just what that bathymetric survey looked like. And then you can kind of see the additional, the larger colors here. This is right at the outlet of the pipe, and that's where that sediment is accumulating. The next slide here, you can kind of see a picture of it where that sediment's essentially getting up to the surface now. So it's continuing to grow and build, which is just meaning more and more material is ending up making its way from the dam to the downstream side. That's kind of the geotech summary of what we've done. Again, we kind of had to stop from what we were doing. We couldn't really do any invasive type testing, given the liability associated with not having an owner in place. So if we just kind of put all of the geotech or the structural side aside for a second, the dam itself still doesn't meet current state regulations from a hydrologic and hydraulic side of the house. So because it's a small high hazard dam, essentially the dam has to pass a half PMF to full PMF event. PMF is a probable maximum flood. It's a really large extreme event, but those are the requirements that the dam would need to pass. Just off of initial modeling efforts on our end, the dam currently, as it currently exists, which just has the primary control structure here, the pipe underneath, that's the only way water can exit the dam. So if you've got a lot of inflow and the dam starts rising up, the only way out is through that structure currently. Typically, I've got a graphic over on the far side. A lot of dams you will see have this emergency spillway or a secondary type of structure. What that does is you have the primary control structure that lets water out during your normal flows, but some of those much larger extreme events, you've got a secondary control structure to get water out of the dam to protect the integrity of the dam so it doesn't overtop and eventually breach. So kind of laying a graphic as to where we went with this. So just highlighted here. So what I'm going to do is the next slide is kind of a plot along the red line that we've got shown to kind of highlight some of the deficiencies or problems that we'll have to work through in the solutions phase. So here's a graphic of kind of the dam along that line I just showed. What you'll see here is everybody's familiar. The water surface, or what we call the normal pool elevation between the two dams, are 5 to 7 feet of differential. The upper pond here, the elevation difference between where that riser currently exists and the top of the dam is about 3, maybe 4 feet at most. So there's not a ton of additional stage you can build up above the riser structure as it currently exists. So you don't have as much capacity above that for those larger extreme events, which is what our models were showing, that if we got a half PMF event, you've got overtopping of the dam and potential failure. What repairs look like, and I'll kind of turn this over to John here in a second. But a lot of the options that are available if you were to bring the dam up to current regulations, it can range in a lot of different ways. The dam could be lowered. You could try and increase the capacity of the original control structure. There's a lot of different ways we can go with this. So what we did is we also then hit the brakes here and said, well, knowing that there's a lot of different routes we can ultimately go with proposed improvements or repairs or alterations to bring the dam up to regulations, without being able to engage the ultimate owner to talk through what options, what are y'all's priorities? What do you want to see? What's a non-starter? We kind of left it at that and said, hey, let's just then report what we've got, and then the next steps can be taken to decide kind of what the ultimate upgrades end up looking like. And then with that, I'll turn it back to John.
And we will all be available, for the Q&A session later on. We'll all be Joe, myself, Matt. We'll all be answering questions. So, but first, let me go through some potential solutions. I think that's what we want to hear, that there are potential ways to move forward and finally put this, hopefully this problem in the past. I will say before we can talk solutions, though, we need to talk about reforming the HOA. I think there has to be an owner. We know that the settlement agreement, was complied with up until a point in time where kind of the HOA just kind of ceased to function. I mean, I wouldn't say ceased to exist, but it ceased to function. So I think any solution is going to require a dam owner to accept responsibility for the dam. I mean, even as Joe said, we can't even really define the full nature of the problem without an owner at this point. Because there's liability, if we were to go and do testing, do punch holes, borings into the dam, no one's gonna do that without an owner authorizing that kind of work. So the lot owners, can proactively reform the HOA, the corporation, as what the Sunnyhill North Lake. As what I mentioned earlier, we believe the reason the HOA was dissolved was from failure to file paperwork with the Department of Revenue. I think I misspoke earlier and said Secretary of State's office. The paperwork was filed with Department of Revenue, we attempted to ask the Department of Revenue, what exactly caused this, what paperwork or what they won't give that information out except to the corporation. So I couldn't even get that question answered. So how to reform the HOA would, I believe, contact the Department of Revenue to find out what paperwork is needed. And then the Department of Revenue will notify the Secretary of State once the HOA is in compliance. And then the Secretary of State's office will restore Sunnyhill North Lake's corporate status. If this doesn't happen, if the HOA is not reformed, the Department of Environmental Services is prepared to name all the parties from that settlement agreement and Sunnyhill North Lake Incorporated as owners of the dam and pursue either a repair or removal of the dam in court. So the solutions now, again, we got to have an owner. We can't get any solutions without an owner. But the first solution is repair. So what would need to be done? How to accomplish this? So you have to work with a licensed professional engineer, such as Joe with Michael Baker, or there are lots of licensed engineers around the state with experience with dams, but you do have to work with a licensed professional engineer. The HOA would submit a permit application and then get a permit for repair from DES, and then the engineer has to stay involved and oversee those repairs, and then once the work is completed, certifies to the department that the work was done properly. But then even if this is, even if we can get to this point, that's just the repair that gets us to hopefully a dam that's back in, a better condition. But, that dam still has to be maintained going forward into the future. So, we have to be looking at the short term and the long term. They're fixing a dam only to let it, deteriorate again is not a solution. So, one thing we didn't have, we couldn't talk about last time I was here, there's a new state grant that was, it's really in its first year. So we didn't have this last time we were here. So this is something that is new, and I'm happy to say that this could be a source of funds to assist with repairing this dam. So it's called the Dam Repair Assistance Grant, and it starts off as a 50-50 cost share grant. So the state pays 50% of the repair, and the dam owner pays 50% of the repair. We can increase that so that the state would actually pay 75% if the dam owner demonstrates financial hardship. Right now, this grant program is getting $1.5 million a year, and they are competitive grants. So, every time we ask for applications, we issue a call for applications. We don't know what we're going to receive. So we have to rank those applications and score them, and try to determine what dams are most in need, the highest risk dams. So it is a competitive grant program. But what I can say is we put out the call for applications back in, I want to say October. And we got applications, and just last week we announced there are 8, we're awarding 8 grants, totaling about $800,000. So we still have money left from the previous round. So and then more than likely we'll get another $1.5 million in the state budget in July. So we have money. We do. Again, we're having to put out a second round of funding for that window that's going to open in March. So just want to make folks aware of this. We didn't have this last time I was here. The grant program, though, there are some requirements you need to be aware of. The dam must be high or significant hazard, which this is a high hazard dam we're talking about, and in poor or unsatisfactory condition. Like I said earlier, the dam is in poor condition, so that requirement would be met. Second requirement, though, is the dam must have an owner. Applications can only be submitted by a dam owner. So if we don't have a dam owner, there's no way to apply for this grant. If the dam has multiple owners, all the owners must sign a statement that they are in support of the grant application. The applications must be prepared with an engineer's involvement, and a grant to fund a construction project must contain an engineer's cost estimate and either a preliminary engineering report, or have a permit issued, or at least a permit application ready to submit. In this case, if we were to get an HOA to reform and prepare a grant application, at this point, it would probably have to be a preliminary engineering report. There's a second grant program out there that is a federal grant program, and this one has been in existence for a while, and the Dam Safety Program administers this grant. Funds are also available in this grant program, but we are not currently accepting applications, but we do anticipate a new funding round this year. This one's a 35% cost share. But it can be increased to 100% if the project is carried out by or for an underserved community. However, this grant program requires a public sponsor to apply. So a homeowners association could not apply directly. A public entity would have to apply on the behalf of that homeowners association. And then lastly, this grant, one of the FEMA requirements is the dam has an approved emergency action plan. This dam does not. Okay, so I talked about a couple grant options. The other option that's out there to help raise funds to either repair or maintain a dam is the creation of a special tax district. So how this would work is if a special tax district was formed, the county would collect that special tax along with property taxes, and then the funds from that special tax could be used for repair and maintenance of the dam. The special tax district can be used to secure a loan, as that repayment stream is guaranteed by the county via the county collecting taxes. And so this could also provide funding for repair, as well as a long-term recurring funding source to maintain the dam. Another option is to remove the dam, but this also, again, requires a permit from Dam Safety, and a licensed professional engineer must develop that a removal plan in this case, not a repair plan. What does removal achieve? The dam safety program would no longer consider there to be a regulated dam, and then liability and responsibility essentially is removed. It goes away. So what would dam removal look like? Here are just some pictures of removal projects where essentially the dam or a portion of the dam was removed to essentially return the natural stream, so the natural stream can flow unimpeded. In the case of the one on the left, a dam in Marlborough County, this work was done in cooperation with DOT. It was a dam damaged by Hurricane Lawrence, maybe, but the road was closed for years and years until the dam owners decided we'd rather have our road back than have an empty lake. So DOT stepped in to help with the dam, essentially put a bridge where the dam used to be. And so that's a successful story of dam owners who couldn't afford to repair the dam, and we were able to find a solution, and DOT, was able to come in and help us get to a solution. And so, and solution 2 is still, I think that same option is on the table here. So the DOT is willing to undertake the engineering and construction to remove the dam at no cost to the HOA. But there has to be a dam owner still to authorize SCDOT to do the work. So again, we still need a dam owner, but this is a solution that restores the road, and there's no money having to come out of people's pockets. There's another solution potentially that would be to make a smaller dam. I think Joe kind of mentioned this a little bit, but this would be a way to essentially have the dam no longer be subject to regulation. So it's no longer state regulated. I can't even say if this is a viable option or not, but the dam would have to be essentially it's only 15 feet in height, so the height was not the problem. The storage of the dam is the problem. So it would have to be less than 50 acre feet in storage to become exempt. And as we said earlier, it's currently at about 174 acre feet. That's a pretty major reduction in the height of the dam. Now, if the dam continues to pose a risk for loss of life, then this is not on the table at all. And so it may not be feasible, but a licensed engineer will be able to evaluate if this is even an option that could be considered. And then this option would also be eligible for grant funding if this is deemed viable and is chosen as the option people want to pursue. So that kind of brings us to the end of the slides. We've been going about 45 minutes. I think we're pretty good on time. I'm going to let Eric be our Q&A moderator. All right, so again, we have DES here. We have city, Matt DeWitt with the city. We have the engineering firm that you heard from, and then we have Brian with DOT. So we'll take questions, I suppose.
John, I'm Bill Rosen on Burbage Street. We have property on the pond. You said that DOT removed the trees, and they didn't. They just didn't. And the other thing that when you had a slide with the Corps of Engineers from 1979, you had a drawing of the dam. If you were to bring that back up, there were no trees on the north base of the dam structure. And it was then under regulation. How did the trees get there? And who should have been keeping them from growing? So, we have other problems, obviously, with the age of the, what do you call it, spillway? No, not a spillway. The outlet works. But see, there's some indication of some vegetation on the lower slope. There's no indication of anything on the north part of the dam. It's vacant. And I have pictures from GIS going back to 2001 showing trees, and then every 2008, 2016, 2020, 2023, trees have stayed. So when did they remove these trees? Because there's no evidence that they did. Aside from that, just since I have a mic, I'll just say that we're going to have a problem because of the people that you identified in red versus the ones in blue and green. Some of the folks in blue will say that their deed never showed any obligation to be a member of the HOA. So basically, the HOA was not established properly, and to just reestablish it isn't going to work because there's just people aren't going to buy into it, and they're not going to feel they're legally obligated to participate. We're going to have a problem with each other, and just that's the 800-pound elephant in the room, the gorilla or whatever. That you're right. We have to decide who's going to own it and have a plan for maintaining the future, which would have to be compulsory. And the HOA is kind of voluntary. It doesn't have any teeth. So that's where I stand.
Okay. So several things raised there. Let me talk about the trees first. So, the settlement, I can't really speak exactly what was done back in 2001. The settlement said DOT was to remove trees within their right of way. And whether that was done or not, there are trees there today. But I think, and maybe Joe would concur, that trees are a minimal or a small piece of the problem today. Trees are kind of inconsequential at this point. We're dealing with much bigger problems. A spillway that is probably is at the end of its life, way past the end of its life. I mean, trees are not the problem anymore. Trees are inconsequential at this point. And again, regarding your point about, maybe being impossible to reform the HOA, we presented an option, I think, that allows there to be, to us to finally put this matter behind us at no cost to anyone in the community. We would only need an HOA, to essentially authorize the removal of the dam, and then we're done. I mean, it doesn't have to be a HOA that functions, that is going to exist any longer than it takes to remove the dam. And then again, DES's only option is to pursue what was in that settlement agreement. Wherever that takes us, I think we're prepared to see how that plays out. But we do have options that, where no money has to come out of anyone's pocket. We get past this situation. But does anyone else? Does anyone else want to comment on Mr. Rozier's question?
Yeah, no. People agreed to sign up for liability to this in what, 2001?
I mean, I can't speak to.
This funds would be paying for I don't.
Well, and again, we provided a solution where you don't have to spend any money.
Yeah, but I believe they will not, and see, I don't have anything on my title or deed that says anything about this, and I trace it back. Person to person to person, and no one knows, and I eventually get to someone who just passed away. This is a big thing for us.
Well, and that's what will be explored if it goes to court. Unfortunately, if what you're saying is true, we have to explore if it comes to that.
Was not filed correctly, and you probably know that.
And if that's true, then we'll learn that. We will learn that down in. Chris Whitehead with our Office of General Counsel.
Hello, all. I think we're at a point where we're not looking at solutions, and if we're getting to court, I think we've all failed. So, sure. As I was saying, I think if we're going to go to court, I don't want to use that as a threat or anything. I'm not, ma'am, and I apologize. And I think that was a little bit misspoken. I think that if we can't get a solution here, amongst what has been proposed, then, we've all failed.
Well, how are we supposed to afford millions of dollars to fix that thing?
Well, I think that there has been some ideas that was proposed by Mr. McCain that includes, all that grant funding. I know that Camden still has some funds available. Yes, ma'am.
The study cost $50,000. The
Yeah.
study cost $50,000. What is it gonna cost to fix it? If the study was $50,000. Yeah. Does anybody in here have $50,000 to start fixing the dam? No. None of us have that. And the people that are on the upper pond are all retired. All of us are retired. All of us on the upper pond are retired. Tell us how we're gonna form an HOA and pay for that.
Let me throw up one more thing.
We can't.
We don't control access to the upper pond. It's a state road that runs across. Access to the upper pond is easily obtained by people who don't even live in Sunnyhill. People come over and launch boats. We fish from the shoreline. They have been doing it for decades. So ownership of the pond would also involve us in potential liability for wrongful death
Absolutely.
and things of that nature. So you're going, it isn't just the cost of fixing the dam. We have we don't want to be held accountable for the inappropriate actions of people who are visiting on the pond when we can't control access to the pond. And then another thing is kind of a DOT thing. If for some reason we decide to go forward and keep the pond, I think a lot of us would insist that at least the lower slope of the dam have a guardrail on it, because right now it's a threat to our children with school buses. You have a driver that has a heart attack and they fall down that stream and the kids are going to die. So, and that's a real potential situation, considering the difficulty that the school district has in getting bus drivers, and a lot of people that drive buses are retired and stuff, and whatever. But there's just so many issues about this pond because it's a state road that transcend just the idea of fixing it. So we have a lot to talk about. And it isn't just about fixing the dam. And I guess in addition to that, the dam, the pond is actually very sick. I don't, the DNR people aren't here, but it is choked with water grasses. And maybe that some of that sediment that's building up down there isn't necessarily soil. It could be just rotted vegetation. There's plenty of it going down that outlet pipe. So anyway, we got so much to talk about, and it isn't just with y'all.
If we did the solution that had the bridge and get rid of the dam, could you explain to us where the water would go? What would happen?
Well, yes, ma'am. So again, that is an option. I think DOT is committed to partnering to help essentially make that happen. It would essentially return the upper dam would no longer function as a dam. I mean, it would just be allow a stream to pass through. Now, the lower dam would remain. The lower dam, we have a different owner. That would be the South Lake folks who own that dam. And we also need to work with them. It's a system. It needs to be handled as a system. And so, I would want to work with the lower dam folks to make sure that their dam could handle, because essentially removing the upper dam would more than likely mean that the lower dam is more susceptible to overtopping in the future. So we would still have to work with the lower dam folks. But what that means, I mean, the bridge, however it looks, the bridge or culvert, in the DES view, that's no longer a dam. I mean, that is no longer a structure that impounds water. So, I think that could be that may be an answer to a lot of what I'm hearing, a lot of the concerns I'm hearing about liability, about cost and expense. So, I mean, I think, we do have the public road on the dam, for what it's worth, it does give us that ability to look to DOT, which would not be the case if there was not a road on the dam.
And to answer the question about sediment, I think you said the sediment comes from hard particles such as rock formation, different things like that. Part of sediment. It's part of organic material, but it's not sediment.
Yeah, I mean, I walked on it. It's sand. It's sand. It's not vegetation.
Is the lower dam in any way compromised? What's the condition?
The condition of the lower dam is also not in good condition. But again, we will work with both. We would work with both dam owners, both upper and lower. But again, if only the lower, we will work with them. But their dam does also need repairs and improvements.
So the decision was made to do away with the dam and create a culvert or a bridge or whatever. Is there funding for any type of reforestation? Because obviously we're going to have, you're reducing the pond to just a stream.
I think so. That would be something that we would work with with DOT, whether there needs to be stabilization of that sediment in the pond bed. But yes, I mean, I think that would be part of the process with working with DOT on how we decommission that dam and turn it into essentially just a road over a stream.
I'm talking about.
As far as reforestation, as far as planting trees and
Yeah, so once you remove the dam, you're essentially going to just have a stream, correct?
yes.
So what is going to be, if your property line is up to the water now, so how much property is going to be moved from where the property line is to the water to where the stream would be?
I don't think what we're gonna do will impact property lines.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the removal of the water. How much footage is that gonna move that line? You see what I'm saying?
I don't, it would not affect your property line.
The water line, where's the water line gonna move?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have, the water line would be much lower. It would return to a stream. So essentially people are, I mean, it would still function as a floodplain. It would still,
What I'm thinking of is, once you remove that water, is there funding? How would you decommission that pond? Would that be the responsibility of the folks on there to clean up that muck and stuff and do that? Or who takes that responsibility?
well, no, so it would not be cleaned up in this, it would return to a grassland or a vegetated area.
All right, so is there funding to help return that to that?
It happens naturally. Now, if there are areas that need to be grassed or stabilized so that we don't have, before that natural process can take place, then yes, that would also be a part of this, what we do with DOT, to stabilize areas that, would be more susceptible to erosion. But in general, it is a natural revegetation process.
So I'm sure once you drain that guy, there's stumps and all kind of stuff that's gonna be in there that was cut prior to.
More than likely, but the vegetation comes back very, very fast. As we've seen, I can testify, we've seen this many times around the state. Yes, ma'am. It would still act as a floodplain as well. It would, depending on rainfall, the water would rise and fall. Do we have any other questions?
Did the solution that was a special tax bill, do you have any idea how much that would add to our tax bills that we already have on property?
No, ma'am. I don't know that. And again, I don't know the intimate workings of that process, but generally, do you have anything on that? I mean, I think the district, that district that is created essentially controls the rate of taxation, depending on what you foresee as your need. If you're securing a loan, your tax rate would be based on repaying the loan. So I mean, I think the district. Yes, yeah.
Wants to be a damn owner. Raise your hand. That's our issue. Nobody wants to own that dam. We want what's best for our community, our neighborhood, without us having to pay so much money that's not even available to us. I think if we had help from the county, the city, the DOT, and it is a public road, I think everybody here wants what's best for us without us having to be a dammer. So.
Can we be shielded from those people that are using the property without us being able to control it? That's a totally unknown risk beyond all this other stuff.
That, I mean, that's just a general trespassing question, I would think.
Is it trespassing? It's like. So we don't have the right of way pretty much comes right to the water's edge, DOT. So we don't have the capacity to put a fence.
That's a legal question. I'm not qualified, I think, to answer. That's a liability and a property access question.
I hate to punt on this one, but you are asking its questions regarding liability and trespass, people coming in. That's outside really the bounds of what our discussion is today. You know,
But it's essential to solve the problem. I mean, it speaks to one of the options. If we keep the dam, we keep the risk. And we have an unknown risk in the form of the liability for people using the pond without us being able to control access to it. So it's a big factor in trying to decide which option to pick. We like the pond. Most of us, I think,
A fence would need to be put up.
but we don't have a right of way on the north line. We can't stop people. from
People
getting-
come from out of the neighborhood. I follow the people myself. From out of the neighborhood, all the way down to Springdale, came in the neighborhood and go fishing
Yeah,
sure.
on that dam. And it's dangerous going down the hill.
so
And so who's responsible? Teenagers. The folks.
No, I wish that the department could answer those series of questions. My best advice would be for you all, and from what I've heard, to reach out to you all attorneys to have that discussion.
these questions came up last time. And so why aren't we addressing them tonight?
Well, again, I don't think that's some of these are not the department's purview.
The question, who's gonna own the dam? You're not prepared to help us make a decision about that, an informed decision. And yet you want to talk about solutions. All this effort is to talk about solutions without defining, getting to the crux of the matter of who's going to own the dam.
Well, I don't think we can make that decision for the group here. I mean, we brought everyone together. We think a discussion with everyone here, but amongst yourselves, could be productive. We discussed how an HOA could be reformed. An HOA can have, again, covenants and bylaws on how a lake is to be used, who can access that lake. I mean, there are benefits to forming an HOA. And again, the HOA, we would finally have an entity that, well, honestly, it's probably still owns it to this day. It's just a non-functioning corporation, but the corporation and the ownership of the corporation still exists. And so,
Of the people that you have defined as stakeholders in the pond.
well, I do think we've come here to try to show options and solutions. We can't make the decision for people. I mean, this is a community decision. And, we encourage the folks here to discuss it, to work together, to use this time if needed to have those conversations.
Ponds attractive. It's a resource that people that live in the Camden and Greater Camden area enjoy. And they would be very unhappy to see it go away.
Well, I will say one thing. Why are we here again after meeting in 2024? And, you say nothing's changed or there's nothing new. I think we have brought some new information and new options to the table. But at the time, 2 years ago, we were prepared, kind of like we are now, to go forward with legal action if needed. The city stepped in and said, let's take a step back. Let's try to look at the dam. Let's see if we can understand the situation with the dam a little better. And so we, with the city becoming, stepping in, we said, yeah, we'll step back. Let's see what we can find out. The city, again, contracted with Michael Baker and has put close to $50,000 into this finding a solution for this. And so that's why we step back, and that's why we've, this is kind of why we've tried to find, a solution. And we're back here today to say, unfortunately, without an owner, we really are at an impasse. So.
Yeah, I've got a question. So you're talking tax district thing. Is that the neighborhood, adding tax to just the neighborhood itself? Yeah, we don't want to do that. Who owns the lower dam and why aren't they fixing it? Are y'all putting them on notice about the lower dam?
Well, the lower, the Sunnyhill South Lake Incorporated, they have their own dam. They own the lower dam.
Yeah.
They were part of the settlement in 2001. In our mind, they have no ownership of the upper dam.
Yeah, I'm talking about the lower dam.
The lower dam, yes,
Yeah.
we know it needs work, and we want to work with that group. Yes, yes, and again, I mentioned the group.
Nobody seems to be taking any responsibility.
That back entrance, everybody that's on the Leonard Circle side of the dam, we can't get out of the neighborhood.
And we're very aware of that, and that's a concern, and that's why we.
And that. And what goes on with it, I just know it's got a lot of patching and a lot of, I call it wrinkles. My grandkids love it because there's lots of bumps and we have fun going over it. But every time I drive over it, I think, Lord, please let that damn hold, because that road's washed out. I can't leave my neighborhood. The other question that I have is, does an HOA, if the neighborhood as a whole would agree to forming an HOA, would that be a potential solution? Not that everybody here would. I don't know if you would or not. I would be willing to look at that if it would be a solution to help everybody.
And I will say the HOA,
It doesn't have to be.
it's still, it exists. It just is not active. And
It's obvious that it's defunct for a reason. Let's be honest, right? It's defunct for a reason. So would the formation of another HOA, if the neighborhood as a whole would be willing to agree to that? I think we all want to come to a solution, and I don't think spending 20 years in court again is necessarily the right course, but.
No, first off, this isn't going to be another 20 years in court. That's.
Well, they did. So,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can be dead by
So in terms of forming a new HOA, if you recall what happened with the previous settlement, what would need to be done is that old HOA would have to do a quitclaim deed to the new HOA.
Okay.
And that could be formed. Additionally, another option could possibly be bring back the HOA from administrative dissolution and add members to that. That could be another option.
I have a question.
It's everybody next time.
The-
That ain't gonna happen.
Well, according to the charter of the HOA, I think there was 25
So it has to be
stockholders. Unless the
Unless.
terms get amended, or it could be quitclaim to a new created HOA.
But that's everybody in the whole.
It would need to, well, it would need to be, if you go back to where that the dots were, it would need to be all those individuals that were either green or blue.
Okay. It would have to be at least those dots.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
I have a question for you. Thank you. As far as the dam ownership for this, I feel for what's going on with all the people with the dots. Obviously, nobody wants to claim ownership to get this dam done. And I figure being that you're a lawyer, you will know, is there any way that these people could sign on to some type of HOA with
some kind of language in there. And we're signing up just to allow you to put a bridge in, and then you have nothing to do with anything after that. And part two of this is that I also think that maybe as an incentive, all these people with all the dots, if you're gonna turn it into a screen and they pay for houses that have some kind of waterfront, maybe they should get some type of land increase or something as maybe they as an incentive to sign up. If you, I mean, I feel for this woman here saying, I like my pond, I want my pond. Obviously, she bought a house saying, oh, I have water in the back. And then it turns into a screen and she's like, now what do I have? So maybe she'd be more prone to sign up if that's gonna disappear, but now I got like another quarter acre of land out of it because it's a screen. I don't know. I thought there would be some way you could put some kind of language in it where it doesn't give them. I understand once the dam is gone, they're not dam owners anymore anyway. So it's really, everybody's just worried that I can see in this room, everybody's petrified to sign up to have any kind of liability to this. There must be some kind of language that they can put in if they do sign up for an HOA to remove responsibility once that happens.
So, and I know Mr. McCain actually touched on this. So theoretically, let's say that the HOA is reformed, and then it goes through the process of dam removal, at which point they're no longer dam owners. You know, any, and you brought that up, any issue regarding how you would use that language or craft that, you know, I hate to use the same standard statement that I've used previously, but that would be, you know, consulting with an attorney to draft that language. Okay. Your second part of your question regarding, I guess, sort of a kicker, I assume, for that, because right, you're losing property values, correct? You know, that's outside of any realm that either the department nor DOT would have. So, okay.
They can sign the pond ownership over to the county. I know in the first meeting, somebody mentioned that. What did you have?
Ask that question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Instead, is there any way owners could sign it over to the county? Bond ownership?
I think that
In the first meeting, somebody mentioned that.
that would have to be a discussion that you all would have to have with, and much like, there would have to be some semblance of owning or a deed to that county. They'd have to be willing to accept it. Yes, sir. Sorry.
So it looked like there was a special situation that, you know, the dam supports the state road and had utilities on it. So at what point could it be, the city of Camden that owns the dam that's responsible for it? And considering that that's a special situation and considering that, you know, it supports access if it would fail, you know, to our side, or I live on that side of the community, that, you know, we wouldn't be able to access our side if it would fail, and just all the things that come along with it. At what point is it not an HOA? Because it looks like there's a lot of pushback on that with liability. So at what point would that be considered a potential special situation that the city would own the dam that would, because of the state road or the state?
I'll say this, if the city were to ever take liability of the road, if we were to take ownership, what would happen is we would turn that back into a stream. We'd have DOT come in and do that project that you saw up there. The city doesn't have, I'm sorry, say again? Yes. Yeah, so if we were to take ownership, which is unlikely, but if the city were to, that would be the option that we would look at. It wouldn't cost anybody anything. You get your roadway back so you can get in and out of your neighborhood. But unfortunately, you would have a stream and not a pond. So that's the downside. I know a lot of y'all bought waterfront property and you like the pond. I get that. But the situation we got right now is nobody wants to take ownership, and you do have a liability on your hands either way. So finding an option that's low cost, low liability, I think that's what they presented there at the end. I feel is the best option for the group. But I'm not an owner here. That's you all. What I am willing to do is if you want to look at it, forming a new HOA and looking down that road, I'm willing to have the city attorney help you draft that agreement. So you're not paying a lawyer. I also got grant funding to help you with the initial study because I felt for this community. It's not necessarily something we had to do, but I wanted to help y'all try to get to the bottom of what's going on. Unfortunately, we can't do that until they get permission from an owner to drill down into the dam and find out what these different pockets are. Are they voids? Are they different materials? What is it made of? And no one's willing to sign off on that. So until that happens, really finding an ultimate solution to keep the dam, if that's what you're interested in, won't happen. So the formulation of the HOA, I think, is the right path forward. And I'm willing to help with the city attorney so you're not putting your own funds forward to help draft that if you need it.
But those funds will be nothing compared to what they find is wrong with the dam ultimately.
Do we know that? I mean, we gotta let them do the study.
Look at all the sediment that's coming out the back. There's probably, damage all in it, more than likely. And so the problem is that people don't want to fund, $1 million+ project, to fix that. Even with grants, 25% of that is $200,000-300,000.
I respect that.
And that's a lot of money to raise from the.
100% agree. And that's why we're here today to figure out what the best path forward is. And whether that is not to have a pond anymore, but go back to a stream. So, I mean, that's the question.
Was Dana's question ever answered about the who would share in if we did a penny tax or whatever? Who shared, just our neighborhood, or is it?
Oh, if you did a special tax district.
Yes,
It would be Sunnyhill neighborhood.
it would just be us neighborhood,
Yeah.
but then we would have to raise $200,000 or $300, $100,000, but we don't know
Take
yet.
that big number that he just mentioned and extrapolate that out over time. Here's the beauty of that, right? The county will front load. So the special tax
So we
district,
get it done,
Correct.
and then we're
and you pay for it over time.
without it.
I have no idea how the agreement ultimately is formed, and it may be cost plus interest. I have no idea, but it would spread it out over time for you, so you're not having to save up and pay for it over 10 years and then get it done, so you get it done right away. And then you spread the costs out over time. It's like financing project.
Okay.
So, quick question.
Sure.
Can the city attorney advise about the liability that we might be exposed to in the process of reforming the HOA in order to do that? I mean, I don't think any of us are interested in being exposed to extended liability. None of us know what that looks like. Can the city attorney advise us how that can be done without exposing the residents to a liability issue?
So the issue you got is you will have liability no matter what's done at first, when you first form the HOA until the removal is complete. And then you can dissolve the HOA. But up until that time, somebody has to take ownership and liability. So if you agree to do the HOA up until the time that everything is fixed, the owners will be responsible for the liability. I know that's what it's done. And I know that's a concern, but it's.
Yeah, we still need to assess the risk.
Sure.
So how do we do that?
I think the only way you're going to be able to assess the full risk is for somebody to take ownership and to do that next part of the study, which the city is willing to put funds towards, which we have.
I'm concerned about this tax issue. Are you saying everybody in Sunnyhill will be taxed?
If you form a special tax district, I didn't hear that last part.
Will everybody in Sunnyhill have to pay the tax to the county if they take?
Yeah, don't quote me on this, but I think if you form a special tax district for the Sunnyhill neighborhood, it would be shared amongst the entire community, I believe.
Not just the Lego.
Not just the Lakers.
Matt, can I? I will say for a special tax district, now there's a process that has to be tested. The special tax district is a defined group of homes. I mean, there's nothing that says it has to be the entire Sunnyhill. It could just be the people that have access to the lake, but the district has, it has to be defined, but then it has to go to a public, to be created, it has to go to a public referendum. There has to be a public vote to form that district. And so the people that would be part of that district get to vote whether they, agree to be incorporated into that district or not. So, but again, we're just putting this out there as a way. I will say this has been used in a lot of other places around South Carolina with homeowners associations that own dams, to essentially, a homeowners association can raise money through its dues, but the beauty of the special tax district is that you don't have to worry about people not paying their dues, and you have the county is collecting those as taxes. And it also, if you're talking about getting a loan from a bank or financing repairs, you're much more likely to get, loans and good, low interest loans to do that if you have that tax district in place.
Just one more quick thing to add. So our engineers that are here tonight made a great point. We could start doing work on the front side though, because it's going to take some time to get approved and to get the paperwork written up and the ownership in line to where when we get to that point where everything's in place, you can immediately start on the project. We just got to start permitting in order to get there. So, I mean, that's an option too. If we're worried about timing and liability and how long you have liability, you can front load some things and work on it on the front side before ownership is finalized. That way, when everything is finalized, they're ready to hit the ground running.
Would have a lot more confidence in that sort of thing if they had more information about how that whole process works. Right now, it feels like a leap of faith. You gotta have a, I don't have faith in that.
If the dam is removed, then who owns the land that's now covered by water that's not specified in a deed? In other words, and one of the things is, okay, the property that these blue dots or green dots are on, there's obviously a deed, and I think some of them go to the water line, some go middle, some of them only go back X amount of feet. So if the land that's left, that's covered by water right now, who will own it? And if a homeowners association is formed, will they own it and will they have liability for it?
Okay. Before we answer that, I want to talk to Chris real quick before I answer that, but I do have an answer, but give me 1 second. I want to make sure I don't screw up when I answer.
But like you said, y'all form a homeowner association and they don't have to let the rest of the lives. That's like spread out.
Excuse me, everyone. Hey, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry to this. I think this is getting to the point where maybe we move to letting folks discuss amongst themselves, but I do want to answer the lady's question. And what I think what I can safely say is, we at DES have looked at plats. We've looked at all the plats. We've looked at deeds to try to determine, who owns what. The parcels that you see. Can't see that. Hang on. You can see that. So I will say, if you look on the county's tax records on their website, this parcel and this parcel show up as unknown ownership. and we've looked at the plats, and when this neighborhood was first laid out as a subdivision, this side of the lake was laid out first back in 65, I believe. And the parcels as you see them are how they are drawn in that first original plat. Now, on this side of the lake came later. And these were part of a later plat for the subdivision. And these parcels essentially show the property going to the shoreline, not to the center of the lake. But again, as you see, this parcel is going to the center. And there's a plat for this property that says the property line goes to the center. So there are a lot of discrepancies in how these properties have been platted out over the years. So I think that's an area that, so I cannot say who ownership of the lake would go to, especially these properties that are considered unknown. But I think everyone really should probably look at your plats, look at your deeds, and talk to an attorney, because I think that's just been that's been unresolved since the creation of the subdivision.
Well, I mean, it's in my understanding, the Department of Environmental Science is going to use this plat as that's their defense. And these are the owners of the dam. And for anything to move forward is what you said, we have to do a quick claim deed. So first thing first, we've got to get these people to come together to reform their HOA in order for anything to go on. Is that correct? Yeah, but he said that you still have to do a quick deal. You have to do so in order for that to happen, these people have to come together and say, we're reestablishing the HOA, and then they take liability to sign that quick deed over until then. So until these people on the original document come together and say, okay, we'll reform the HOA, all this is mute. Until we figure that gets done, we can't do anything until we can't do a quick claim deed. We can't get a new HOA. If we can get a new HOA, then we just have an HOA. We don't have anything else, but we won't take ownership until this original settlement agreement, those people come together to do the quick claim deed. Is that what the attorney said up there? Or can we form an HOA and do a quick and just say we take ownership?
So as we had with what happened between the developers doing the quick claim deed of everything that they had, a representative of the HOA, whether that be the registered agent, could also submit that quick claim deed to the potential new HOA. Okay.
Okay. The way you said it earlier was that you had to do a quick claim deed, but this HOA had to come back on to get that before they could move on. That's what I heard from you. Thought you said
right, and that is just what I said. But you don't need all 25 shareholders.
But it says in there that the owners of the property get it too. So it should have been passed down. So as long as it can be a quick claim deed, then yeah, you can do it. But until we can get that, this is all mute at this point. You know, I mean, nothing's going to be done until we can figure out who's taking ownership. So that's what as a community, we need to come together and say who's taking ownership.
Right.
A question that also speaks to the HOA. So that HOA was a corporation, right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
So when you form a corporation, is the individual liable or is the corporation liable? Sorry, Mr. Lawyer, but do you know what I'm asking now? I feel like a lot of people
I do
take to step forward because they're afraid of liability, and I understand those fears. I also feel like if people better understood what they were signing on for or understood the liability that they were taking on, we might have some forward motion. I don't know that, but.
So I can speak in generalization. I'm sorry, I can speak in generalization. So if you form a corporation, as long as you are not taking money, commingling funds, if it's done properly, so you wouldn't be susceptible to piercing a corporate veil, then there would not be personal liability.
Okay.
That's a generalization, okay?
And in general terms, could a corporation be formed with, I think somebody may have already asked this, very specific mission is not the right word, but I'm not a lawyer. But do you understand, like, the corporation can be formed for a very specific purpose, a very narrow, specific purpose, and have the people who would be willing to sign on to it. Yeah, do you understand what I'm asking? Like, I'm just really trying to get down to the nitty gritty to define, because I don't even live on the pond, but I would like the solution rather than fighting in court for another 20 years like they did before. And they've left us holding the bag. I don't want to leave my kids holding the bag. I don't want to leave anybody who buys my house holding the bag. I don't think that's right. I feel like we have to try, if we can, to find the solution. So I'm just trying to do a deeper dive into the liabilities that we might face if we chose to form another HOA, and if we could get the quit claim or corporation, thank you, and move it forward. A reasonable manner.
So broadly speaking, a corporation can be formed for a narrow purpose.
Okay, thank you.
HOA is that whoever signs on to the HOA, it seems like is taking on responsibility for whatever they find with the dam, which, you know, it could be a little problem or it could be a huge problem. And then all of a sudden, they're responsible for that. And I think that's the reluctance that you're finding with people wanting to sign on to develop an HOA, because it's scary, knowing that you just, you know, took part in this, knowing that now whatever is found, which could be really, really bad, now you're a part of that. And I think that that's where you don't want, you know, to be a part of that. You know, I think that's the root problem with people not wanting to do that, or being scared to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Yep, that's precisely the issue.
So at this time, you know, it's 8:08. We were hoping to kind of wrap up at 8:30 and let you know, get out of here. But would this be a good time for folks maybe to just discuss amongst themselves if anyone has ideas, if anyone, you know, or any individuals who feel like they want to take kind of a leadership role in seeing this move forward. You know, happy to keep the lights on until 8:30 or later. But I do think discussions amongst everyone could be productive, especially what we've talked about here. And we will remain in the room if you do have other questions. But at this point, I think we're going to go ahead and end the formal meeting. And then, you know, let's hope we can have some fruitful discussions. But again, we'll keep the lights on as long as we need to. But thank you all for coming. Again, we will we have please, if you didn't sign in, please make sure you sign the sign-in sheet. And I think everyone should be aware, we do have a website for this dam, and that's where we will keep folks updated. But thank you again, and I think at this point we're going to conclude the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
If you have any questions, there'll be us that will stick around, just come and grab one of us and hopefully answer more questions.
Mark, it's on that.